You've stumbled into the right place. This is Two Ways, the Morning Meeting, featuring Dan Turrentine, introducing Sean Spicer, and with Mark Halperin. Thank you for joining. We're going to run through the day's events, lickety split. And we're going to want to take your questions if you're here on the two-way platform. And if you are, please, as some have already done, raise your electronic hand. On both programs yesterday, we had some new folks. They were delightful, innovative, clever, interesting. So please, if you've never raised your hand before, today could be the day. Become part of the conversation. If you're watching on YouTube, welcome. We'd like to have you there. We have a growing and vast worldwide audience on the YouTube network. We're pleased to have you join. As always, as you sample the program, as you soak it in, as you luxuriate in the warm bath created by the verbiage of Dan and Sean, please engage in conduct that reflects peace, love, and understanding. The presumption of grace for all in this holiday season. You do get two exceptions. Don't use them all up on Stephen Miller and Donald Trump. It's a rookie mistake to just say Trump and Miller. Don't do it. You might want to save them for others. Sean, the tree looks spectacular. What is going on with the Spicer wrapping? Where are we in the wrapping process?
I'm staring at some of them and not good.
Yeah,
I think Dan and
not
I
good.
are from the same school.
Yeah.
It really is not a pleasant sight to look at. And if you
All
get a
right.
gift from me, you know very quickly whether it was wrapped by me or some other family member.
Does your family watch this show, Sean?
No,
No. What do
the
you want
kids.
for
I
Christmas?
make the kids go to school
Yeah.
because it's the
What do
dad
you
I am.
what do you want for Christmas, Sean?
Um, I want peace. I want love.
Yeah,
Uh,
understanding. Dan, what do you typically get for Christmas? First of all, your kids who are like teenagers, do they give you presents or is that long past if you have a
No,
kid?
no, no, no. They just complain that they don't have more.
Uh, that's well
yeah,
within the
generally it goes, can
best
you
of
have some
Hollywood
money
spirit.
to buy you something?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Or why did this person get this and not me? Yeah.
Yeah. It's peace on earth. All
They're very
right.
grateful. Yeah.
Here's what's happening in your world today. That's the way you used to introduce the weather segment on the Today Show, right? All right. President of the United States, intelligence briefing at 2 p.m. because why rush? 2 p.m. I think 2 p.m. is 1 a.m. in Beijing, so you want to be on top of the Chinese when they least suspect it. And then he departs for Wilmington, Delaware at 9:10 p.m. because, again, all is not right in the world unless the Bidens are spending the weekend in Delaware. The vice president's got an event today, everybody.
Wait,
11:35
wait, hold
Eastern
on. Just time
time.
out. Time out.
Yeah,
It's Tuesday.
Tuesday.
yeah.
I just,
They're departing for Delaware. It's
That's all
Christmas.
right.
It's almost
Trump's in
Christmas.
control. Don't worry about it.
It's nearly Christmas, Sean. Christmas is like a week away. Yes, it's Tuesday, but in China, it's already Wednesday by the time they go. Think of it that way. Vice President delivers remarks to young leaders who are active and engaged in their local communities. This speech in Prince George's County, Maryland, will be pooled press, open to pre-credentialed media, and live streamed at whitehouse.gov/live. You can bet that those remarks will be featured tonight on Two-Way tonight. So stay tuned for that. Donald Trump, no known public events after yesterday's mammoth press conference, which we'll be discussing in a moment. J.D. Vance, no known public events. Pete Hegseth back doing courtesy calls after a day of murder boarding, we were told. Tulsi Gabbard also doing courtesy calls. Both of them, I believe, or at least Tulsi Gabbard, meeting with some Democrats, including John Ossoff, who some have singled that up for re-election in what is now a reddish purplish state. Perhaps John Ossoff will want to burnish his MAGA-ish credentials by voting to confirm some of Donald Trump's nominees. A variety of congressional events on the Hill, separate from the courtesy calls. For example, Speaker Johnson and his leadership team hold a post-conference meeting press conference, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. You can see that on C-SPAN, I bet. Pete Aguilar, Debbie Lingle, and various other House Democrats hold their own press conference at 11. And then at 3, I'm excited about this, and I hope you are too. It's the Hanukkah Capitol Hanukkah events, including a menorah lighting featuring Speaker Johnson, Leader Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, and Rabbi Levi Shemtov. Rabbi Levi Shemtov. All right, that's what's happening. So except for the vice president's event and maybe some of the courtesy call conversations, not a ton, at least as we currently know it. So let's talk about yesterday's press conference that occurred after we went off the air. I showed a ton of it last night on Two-Way Tonight, but eager to hear from you guys. What are the lessons from that press conference? What are the things that happened that you think have implications going forward for the rest of the transition and for the Trump presidency? Sean M. Spicer. The M stands for media.
I think the tone and tenor since the election has been phenomenal for Trump. The Meet the Press interview, the Time Magazine interview, that press conference yesterday. A lot of folks in my world that voted for Trump hesitantly, sort of couldn't vote for, previously might have even voted for Biden. Harris pushed him away, have been very impressed with the tone and tenor of Trump. The question that got a lot of attention on Iran really shows, I think, how Trump has grown. That he said, he even complimented the reporter. He said, "That's a great question, but do you
sure
think
that wasn't sarcasm?
So
I'm serious. I thought it was sarcasm.
did
I
I.
don't know. I thought he was
I don't
basically
mean to
saying, "I see what
understand.
you're
I don't
trying
mean
to
to
do
undermine.
here."
Yeah, yeah. All right. Maybe you're right. Sorry. Go ahead.
But anyway, I think that we'll see, right? From January 20th on, but there's something very, very thoughtful that's going on and deliberative about his thought process. I also thought that, we talked a while ago about the visit to France and how he was welcomed by Macron and others as almost the sitting president. I thought yesterday, what was fascinating to me was you have Massa coming over saying, "I'm going to invest 100 billion with a B dollars, netting 100,000 American jobs." And what does Trump do? Will you make it 200? I mean, I thought to myself, this is a guy who, it shows to me the big difference in the contrast that we're about to see, and how much of an impact he's already making. I was really impressed with the press conference. I thought the thoughtfulness that he gave to a lot of questions was, even on the Bobby Kennedy stuff. He reaffirmed his support for certain vaccines with polio. I mean, he was really solid yesterday.
Yeah. Did you mention the DeSantis thing?
I did not, but I thought he was interesting how he answered that Senate question. He said Ron's doing a good job. Again, very measured.
And let him off the hook after days
yeah.
of seeming pressure. You got to pick Laura. All of a sudden, it's like it's his decision. She's awesome. He's awesome.
It's almost like I think he knows the answer, though.
Yeah, correct. Yes, I think not almost. But again, he could have, if it's true that you and I believe he knows the answer, rather than saying, DeSantis is a bad guy, bad judgment, da da da. He said graciously, it's up to him. Like he didn't lash out. To me, that's the biggest thing. He didn't lash out in that press conference. Dan,
Right.
thoughts?
Yeah, I think, look, we talk about, or people are saying Kamala Harris was an improved political athlete. Trump looks like he's an improved presidential athlete. I mean, to Sean's point, the tone and the tenor were remarkable. I mean, I said I thought the Meet the Press interview, he appeared almost old. Well, I mean, I think, Sean, you may be right. Like, this is now consistent that he is more measured. The anger and stuff that he would normally have kind of lashing out, we have not seen yet. And he does seem more disciplined. He didn't take the bait. To your point, Mark, he didn't bash DeSantis. I even thought, and you guys talked about it last night on Two-Way Tonight, he didn't bash Biden. Like on a couple instances, he would say, "Oh, the president knows," or, "I don't know why the president is selling off the border materials." But, the old Trump would have taken a verbal baseball bat to those people. And even the media, like he joked.
Even when he was threatening lawsuits, even when he was being critical of the Biden administration, he pulled his punches.
Yep.
And this is the version of Trump that Republican strategists, like establishment Republican strategists, have been begging for years. And have always said, if Trump could just be like that and push his issue positions and be true to his claim that he's just a counterpuncher, he would revolutionize the politics because he would grow the coalition. Sean.
Well, but wait, hold on. I have one third point. So he's
Yeah.
tone and tenor, more presidential. He's more disciplined. The third point, though, is he is still Trump, right? There were, lies and exaggerations and misdirects just at, a volume that, as Mark, you say, he's hard to cover because what do you pick on? Like, you can't just say, 50 things. So as a Democrat, for all the reasons that I think it was very impressive, and he is going to be a more formidable office holder there were also signs that are like, all right, he is still Trump. There will be opportunities for the party, and he has a tendency to get out over his skis, and that's going to present some opportunities for Democrats.
Yeah, I would say that one of the things that he has to do, Dan, is maintain that authenticity. He's still Trump. If he sat there and said, "Good afternoon, thank you for coming. I welcome you all, and I'm thankful that the First Amendment gives us the right to have this respectful and civil dialogue," you'd be like, "What the hell's going on?" So he's got to still be Trump, and I thought that was yesterday was a perfect balance. The one difference that I want to just call out, and it's something that is always when people ask me about Trump, I'll tell them straight up, if you come after him, he'll come after you. If you treat him with respect, he'll treat you with respect. And in 2016, after the election, there was this continued attack on the legitimacy of him, of the win, of the effort that we put forward. And that was reflected in his responses. If you look at how this has gone with Bezos and Zucker, et cetera, going down, bended knee, the media treating him with a lot more respect, he's reflecting that the incoming, right? In 2016, it was attack. You didn't really win. Russia did this. You're really not a legitimate president. And so he was like, all right, I'll fight back. I'm going to show you how I am. In this time, there's a level of, they're very, you can't deny the win. You can't deny the magnitude of what his campaign put forward. And he is reflecting back that gratitude, that, that acknowledgement that's coming from folks from the tech sector, from foreign leaders. And so I think it has always been that case. And we're seeing it now manifest itself in 2020, where he is becoming the person. You show him respect, you interact with him with respect, you show him that, he is the duly elected president, and he will respect you back. And I think you're seeing that.
Yeah, it's so different than 8 years ago. And to level set here, everybody should root for the success of every American president. But in my business, we're here to hold people accountable. When we say here that the transition is not only unusual, but unusually successful, it's just a factual statement. It's not about rooting for Trump. It's not about not holding him accountable for not telling the truth. It's about the reality. Now, this may not translate into the presidency, but there's signs that it could, and it probably in some ways will. But this is extraordinarily successful, what he's doing. And as Sean said, you can see it in the reaction. World leaders, business leaders, members of Congress, the confirmation kerfuffles, I think, are the exception that proves the rule. He's in such a commanding position, and he prefers this. He prefers to be loved and courted rather than attacked. And the last thing I'll say, I came up with a stat this morning. Maybe this is not original. Donald Trump, if you count winning the nomination and winning the general, he's 5 for 6. That's like all-time record. Roosevelt, is in the modern era, but it's an all-time record. And this victory, winning the nomination and then winning the general, after showing the country who he is and what he's about, and making the agenda for a second term really clear, and having a second term not exhausted, not having an exhausted staff, having spent 4 years writing executive orders and figuring out who he wanted to hire, he's in a position to be a much different and more formidable second term president. And you see that in the press conference where he is, again, it's just objective fact. He's confident. He's not, as Sean said, he's not pulling every punch. But this is the version of Trump that he thinks can govern and go down in history, and that's what he wants. All
Mark,
right,
can I just add one thing, though, that is
Yes,
also like the other end of the spectrum, which is it is every day more and more, it is shocking Biden's absence. Like, part of me wonders, like, where's your manhood? Like, I can't see George W. Bush or Bill Clinton allowing the incoming president to dominate, not just like with announcements and like press conferences, but like I opened the Wall Street Journal this morning and there is this story that the Syrian rebels are calling Trump to get the president of Turkey to not invade, right? Like, Trump doesn't control our military. Like, Trump does, but people aren't even thinking, like, where's Biden's pride to, like, on some level call a press conference and kind of say, like, look, he's going to get sworn in. I'm helping him with the transition, but I am still president and I'm doing A, B. He's going to Delaware on Tuesday. Like, he just, So Trump is doing a great job, with the hand he's dealt. But the other end of this is Biden's just MIA. It's
Dan, can
unbelievable.
I ask you a question? Do you think part of this is that, and I'm saying this in a very honest to God, respectful way, but you see him leaving, for Delaware today. We've really seen him. I wonder, and this goes back to what we talked about during the campaign. Is he okay? I mean, like, is he up to the job anymore?
I
And
don't
and
believe that.
No.
I mean,
and
I think they're probably worried that if they put him out, they risk a moment that dominates the news and moves up to the top of the tombstone, the mental
well, but
acuity.
also understand this, and that's why I say this. I'm trying to be respectful of the president because I just wonder if, to your point, it's not just his legacy, but we have 35 days until the inauguration. If we as a nation show weakness, that the president of the United States walks out there and can't, doesn't look like he's got control, that's a sign of weakness for our country. And we have 35 days until the next administration comes in. And I honestly question, we talked about this in terms of political abilities during the campaign. Could either he or Kamala go out and do something? But I start to wonder, based on the schedule now, is he up to performing, the day-to-day activities? The national security, the briefing today for the PBD is at 2:00. I mean, that's not normally how it works. Not that you can't put it in the afternoon based on something, but it's not like he's got some big event in the morning that they're just scheduling around.
Yeah. Sean, I want to ask you for your knowledge and analysis of this, because you know about it. How has Team Trump cracked down on leaking so much? There's a few things like some flaps during the personnel stuff, but for the most part, in the campaign and now, you're not seeing the marionette strings, right? So what's is that order from on
Well,
high? Well, how is that happening?
it's a really interesting question you're asking because the only leaking that you've seen is from the transition. And I mean, in terms of the names getting out ahead of President Trump at
And
times.
there was stuff about the investigation into Boris.
Right. But those are I mean, I can almost, I'm not going to do it in this forum, but I could probably tell you the names.
Yeah.
The reality is that, look, I think it's the mentality that's different. The mentality doesn't reward it as much, number one. And number two, there's a much greater sense of teamwork. We were a very hodgepodge group in 2016, and there were internal questions about loyalty and who was more loyal and who was, I don't think they've got that issue this time. And therefore, there is a sense of team and commitment to the president that wasn't there in 2016. Unfortunately,
You think Trump cares about this? Does he appreciate it, or because a lot of
well,
presidents
he
really
doesn't
detest
care.
leaks?
The thing is that he doesn't, like, I remember when at one point on the Hill, I had a boss that said, if you get caught leaking, I will fire you. Right. And the staff knew that. So if they got a call from a reporter, they came to me, hey, I was contacted. What do you want me to do? How do you want to handle it? In Trump world, that's not the case. And Trump doesn't, there's no repercussion for going out there and doing something as long as it results in positive. Right. So it's just not, people kind of do it at their own mercy right now. Like, hey, if I do this and it works out, I think I'll be rewarded. But there's much less of a sense of I want to do it.
Yeah.
Right. That's the difference.
This is the easiest question I've ever asked on the program. Do you know who the biggest leaker in Team Trump is?
Currently or previously?
Both. There's one champion, Donald Trump.
Trump, I was just going to say
Well,
that.
Donald Trump is
there's
the
a
biggest
story.
leaker.
I'll leave this. I will tell you there was a moment at the White House where a reporter called me, and I was like, there's no way that happened. I was in the room. There was three people. And so the take that you're getting, and I called him up. I knew him. I knew this reporter for a long time. And I said, dude, this is ridiculous. Da, 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 da. And he just said, and we had known each other. Like I said, we had a good relationship. He said, trust me on this. I have a very high source. And I went,
Yeah.
oh, crap.
Exact same thing happened to me in the first campaign in 16 during Veep Stakes. I was talking to one of the contenders about whether they were in play and what the conversations with Trump had been like. And he was like, Mark, that just never happened. This is all just fantasy world. And I was like, well, if it's fantasy world, that's interesting because I also have had a very good source in that instance. And then the senator acknowledged that perhaps the story I was told was actually true. So it was good. It was a good single source to have. All right, I want to switch to two Democrats again. If you want in on the conversation, please raise your electronic hand if
I
you're
will
here on
say
the
this
two-way
just for the
platform.
record, because I know that you can't leak if you're the principal. Like that's your job.
Exactly. Exactly. That's
So,
they're your crown jewels to hand out as you wish.
right, but I'm saying that when you asked, I had a different particular
Yeah.
staffer in mind because if you're
Yeah.
the principal, you can't by definition leak.
Yes. I'm pretty sure I know who you're thinking of, but maybe not. All right. AOC in committee yesterday lost her bid to take over the chair of a powerful committee, but today is the full vote of the caucus. Perhaps she'll win, perhaps she won't. Dan, what is the ceiling on AOC's political aspirations? For instance, could she be president of the United States? Or is that really not what her game is?
I mean, she may want to run for president someday. She's young enough. She's got a long runway. I think she wants power. And what she first tried, which so many before her have also done, is they've tried to be the bomb thrower, to come in and shake stuff up. I mean, she endorsed primary opponents against sitting colleagues, which is almost unheard of. She refused to pay her dues to the DCCC. And she famously, in a 2020 interview, said Nancy Pelosi needed to go. And that all of that didn't work out very well. It's a small club. It's like high school. And her colleagues, who you have to, in order to get power, you have to win their vote, gave her the middle finger. And, I think she then, in the last 4 years, has tried to be a good team player. She campaigned for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris very actively. She's paid her dues, like literally given the money to the DCCC. And so I think she wants power. She wants to move up. Like so many young members, I think she sits there and thinks, I don't want to wait 30 years to be a committee chair. Yeah. And if you look in her state, is she going to run for governor? Is she going to challenge Chuck Schumer or Kirsten Gillibrand? Does she want to try to run for mayor in a, jungle primary? And I think she sees becoming a committee ranking member as her best bet. So I think she's ambitious. I think it's good to have young, ambitious, restless members. That energy is ultimately good for the party. But, Nancy Pelosi may not have much longer, but while she's there, she still rules with an iron fist.
Yeah,
While she came up short, it wasn't that much. I mean, I actually
wasn't that much.
Right. It was
Politico. Sorry, let me just make one point. Then I want to hear what you think of AOC and her future. Politico says that amongst the things she's saying in campaigning for this position is she'll stop primarying people.
Yep.
And that's a huge deal symbolically and maybe substantively. Sean.
Well, that's the thing is that, I mean, look, you saw some of the guys in our conference do this with like Jim Jordan, who kind of, as you want to move up the ladder, you have to sort of take on more of the leadership role, paying the dues, agreeing that you're more of a team and a coach than a player. I was actually impressed Conley was in a very different situation in terms of the other folks. He isn't as much of an old bull as, say, a Nadler. But I still think she came pretty close. And I also, she had, as Dan said, I mean, we also forgot she staged a sit-in like day 2 of her congressional career in Pelosi's office. So this isn't, she had a lot of forces against her that didn't want to see her rewarded. So considering all that, but I still think that she has, look, I was blown away during the summer up here in Rhode Island. And when she was running against Ed, when Ed Markey was being primaried, Ed Markey, who is sort of a New England statesman, has ads with walking with AOC being like, I'm endorsed by AOC, which I just found so demeaning. But that just showed you how powerful she is with that progressive wing, right? And so I think she's got. I mean, look,
what's the source of her power, Sean?
I think that Dan's brought this up before. I mean, she has got an authenticity, a younger authenticity, like Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump. There's a populist authenticity. She opens herself up in a genuine way. I mean, I remember back in the day, Mark, and you guys will appreciate this. I mean, Paul Wellstone, I always felt like was a true, he meant what he said from Minnesota. Like he was an authentic liberal and he was proud of it. And there's something that even on the other side, you can appreciate that. Bernie Sanders, I think, is an authentic populist. I don't agree with a damn thing the guy says, but I think that he really does want to tax everybody. He does want a socialist environment. And he means it. And I think AOC, again, I don't agree with anything she says. I think, but there's a genuineness to her, in the same way that Donald Trump has opened himself up. People are tired of like poll tested responses, cookie cutter answers. Um, and again, it doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but there's a level of like authenticity that, because the problem is too many people watch this now are faking it. And I always, when I get asked this all the time, how do I, be more like Trump? And I'm like, Trump was Trump. But I always give people the example of Rick Schneider, the former governor of Minnesota. His Twitter handle was one tough nerd. He embraced himself.
Michigan.
Michigan, yeah.
Michigan. Apologies. Um, and the idea is be who you are. Like, don't try to go be a sports person if you're not. When Elizabeth Warren did that thing, like, look, it's a Miller Lite in my fridge. I will drink it. It was so ridiculous. No one bought it. And so you've got to, I'm not saying you agree with them, but I think you can appreciate she goes and, brushes her teeth and has a TikTok live. I mean, it's just,
Right. All right.
people are like,
All
I
right.
know it.
One more Democrat we're going to talk about, and then we're going to open the floor and wonder what this person is up to. Rahm Emanuel, coming back home soon from Tokyo, where he's been U.S. ambassador. He did a couple prominent New York Times interviews. He seems to have flirted with the DNC chair slot, but passing on that. And today he has, roll graphic, please. He has an op-ed in the Washington Post. It's kind of classic, like rules of the road. You guys put up that graphic? There we go. Rules of the road, op-ed piece, the road back to power for Democrats. It begins with messengers and messages that meet the moment. There's nothing in it that I would consider revelatory or particularly innovative, but it is something. So, Dan, people are talking about Rahm running for president. Is that a plausible thing of running a presidential campaign in 2028?
Absolutely. I mean, look, keep it simple, stupid. Politics is not a complicated business. And I think that, just as Sean talked about, there's an authenticity in Trump, there's an authenticity in AOC. One link between the two of them, they're fighters. They're outer borough, tough SOBs who are unafraid to pick a fight and not apologize. Well, it's not New York, but it's Chicago. Rahm Emanuel is tough. He is unafraid to pick a fight. He is unafraid to get in your face. And I think what he's talking about, which is, and I've said this before, you go back to the Trump's, the strength, the secret to his success are the issues that he picked in 2015. He channeled the rage of tens of millions of people, and he's ridden it, up until today. What Rahm is arguing is, like, what is on people's mind? And, we seem distant and detached, he says. And he talks about kind of being in the right place at the right time. And Rahm, why not? I mean, who knows if he'll be successful? He's going to have a problem with the base that he'd have to solve, but winning candidates figure out how to kind of piece it together. And if there's anyone who knows how to do it, it's Rahm Emanuel.
Sean.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think he reads the landscape really well. So he'll know the reason he didn't go forward with the DNC thing is he knew it was a loser and he didn't want to cater to so I do think, look, the other thing that we're leaving out is the guy can raise a boatload of cash. Yep. And that's a huge factor early in a presidential campaign. So he can adapt. He's a fighter. He will go do things that nobody else will do. You want to talk about embracing people. We talked about that Flaherty comment about not getting on podcasts. People would take Rahm in a heartbeat, I think, just because he can mix it up. He can talk sport. I mean, like, he would be a good guest. And so I think that, like, if he chooses to go forward, when I look at somebody floating an op-ed like this, if Ron was fatter and lost weight, I'd be like, okay, he's running. I mean, he's going to do something. He's either going to launch a podcast or doing something. But that op-ed, to me, because to your point, it was almost like a warning signal. It wasn't anything like mind-boggling, like, oh my God, he's saying some really innovative things. But what he is doing is laying the groundwork and sending up that trial balloon saying, hey, I'm thinking, if you're interested in what I'm thinking, give me a call. I'll pretend that I hadn't thought about it. I'll ask you if you're committed to me. I'll write your name down and we'll go forward.
Final questions about Rahm, and you need to answer one word, one letter answers. Ready? Here we go. If Rahm runs for president, will he be endorsed in the nomination process by Barack Obama? Dan, yes or no?
No.
Sean.
the process or early in the process?
Will he be endorsed before the voting begins? Before there's primaries or caucuses?
No.
Will Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton endorse Rahm? Dan?
One of them will. Don't ask me which one.
Sean?
Hillary will.
Okay. Which of these would be Rahm's biggest weakness in a nomination fight? Not a general, but a nomination fight. His record in Chicago, opposition of from the progressive wing of the party, being Jewish, or his personality? Dan, A, B, C, or D? Record in Chicago, A.
His record in Chicago and one incident in particular.
Yeah. Sean?
Chicago.
The correct answer is B, opposition of the progressive wing of the party, which relates in part to his record in Chicago. But
the only thing, though, is, Mark, I think that the base is against him now, but he understands how to pick a fight. Yeah. And I think he would look for something that would animate the progressive base.
He would emulate the Clinton 92 playbook, which is you find endorsers on the far left who say how great you are. That's the good cop. Then bad cop, he'd do some Sister Soldier stuff. But I still think that'd be his biggest.
There you go. And then we get back to Chicago.
I still think that's his biggest problem. All right, last question. This one can be a sentence. Sean first. What should Rahm's slogan be if he runs for president?
F me, F you.
F me, F you. That's close to correct. Dan.
On your side. I know it's cheesy.
The correct answer is one tough motherfucker for one tough nation.
There you go. I like it.
Yeah. All right.
That's on your side.
Yeah, it's pretty much. It's a more colorful way of saying on your side. Meghan McCain, who's watching and texting me, wants to point out correctly, Sean M. Spicer, that Donald Trump is not only a counterpuncher. He does regularly, despite his claim that he's only a counterpuncher, he attacks people all the time who don't attack him first. Meghan wanted me to make that point, and she's absolutely correct. And I say it all the time. It's one of the Trump lies that gets to me because it's just a lie. So he does counter. Now I will say this: he does counterpunch. A higher percentage of his attacks than the left wants to concede are counterpunches, but it's not 100%. All right.
I would argue that in a lot of cases it's a perceived punch.
Yes, but his threshold for feeling punched is like very low, very low.
I think he likes a foil.
Yeah,
he always likes to have a foil.
John, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are. You're a Democrat. I know. I'll tell folks that. And what's on your mind? What's on your mind, sir?
Yeah, I'm from the 3rd Congressional District of New York, very famous earlier in the winter. I'm from the one of the hometowns that I think Sean Spicer knows very well. Back to an old story. We haven't mentioned it yet, but this Hasselbein story related to Pete Hegseth. And I have 2 questions. The first one is simple. Does it have legs?
Tell people who didn't read the piece what the piece is about.
Well, evidently this one of the close Sherpas to Pete Hegseth, appearing prominently in side by side with him on his hill journeys, is a retired, if we can put it that way, Master Sergeant in the Army who was court-martialed for a really, really brutal assault. And through various machinations, it ended up in a mistrial, and he was given the choice of either being tried again or simply retiring after 22 years honorable discharge.
Okay, so your first question is, does that story have legs? What's your second question?
And the second question is, I think we kind of covered it yesterday, earlier this morning, rather, about Trump's press conference, about this very moderated tone, but particularly on the issue of primary threats to Republicans that would vote against one or more of his nominees. And the media is making much of the fact that it's not really a full-bore threat. There's a lot of trapdoors to that threat. So the question is, if Republicans vote quietly no or behind the scenes ask the nomination to be sunk, will that be a way to avoid a primary response from Trump?
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll answer this part of the second question, which is, I don't believe nominees will be put on the floor who will fail. I believe they'll either have the votes, there'll be a floor vote, or they'll be pulled, as was happened with Gates. So I don't think you're going to see no votes, but I may be wrong, but that's my sense. Dan, what are your thoughts on the legs of the story and then the primary question?
I think it's hard to make a connection between a Sherpa and the candidate that they're
He's really
walking
more of a security guy
Yeah, I
than
mean,
a
I think
Sherpa. So
it certainly does not sound good. And you would rather have people around you have clean records than cause controversy. But I think it's a little bit of a stretch to say, because of somebody around Pete Hegseth should not be the nominee. I think that as far as the primary threats, look, I mean, both parties do it. I mean, when Democrats had a labor nominee that was, holed up because Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema were uncomfortable, they basically drove both of them out of the party. And by the way, we lost one of the seats, but for, a crazy nominee in Arizona on the Republican side, we probably would have lost 2 seats. So, both parties do this. It's politics. At the end of the day, you're accountable to the voters. And if your colleagues think you're getting too distant from them, threatening to run somebody else, I've known people who have said, bring it, and they've crushed their primary challenger. And I've known people who say, bring it, and they go out with their tail between their legs and they lose.
Sean.
3 things. One, I agree with Dan on the Sherpa stuff or whatever role this guy is playing. I don't know enough to answer specifically, but what I will tell you is if you're going after somebody who's standing next to somebody that doesn't generally, unless there's a direct connection with the event itself or whatever, it's a hard bridge to cross. On the second piece, there's 2 things about primaries. One is you got to get a candidate. So somebody would have to step forward and say, I'm willing to do it. They'd have to be credible. They'd have to go to, I mean, you saw this in Wyoming with respect to Harriet Hageman and Liz Cheney. She said, I'll come forward. Everybody got behind her. But you have to have a person that's willing to do that, number one. Number 2, I agree with Mark. Look, if this is going to go down to a point, I think, these guys aren't dumb, right? They'll call Mar-a-Lago. They'll say to the president, Mr. President, I've got a problem with X. So-and-so did this. I can't get over this. I really don't want to publicly vote no with you. And the president will either say 2 things. Okay, I get it. Like this is horrible, but they're not going to go down. So I got it. Or they're going to say to him or her, Senator, I'll tell you what, you're going to piss me off if you do this because we're on, we're 1 vote short. But the conversation's not going to happen in a vacuum where suddenly they're going to vote no and then they're going to be a primary. A person has to primary you. And the president would have to feel that. So how they handle it matters. And most of these senators are politically adept enough to know that you call down, you explain your case to them, and either they agree with you, and then you use that as the cover. I called the president. I explained the situation to him. He said that I was okay. He understood my concerns. We're good. Or he yelled at me and told me to go certain places and go from there.
That's what I read out of it too, and it was characteristically un-Trump-like. So I saw a lot of trap doors in that statement.
John, thank you. Great
thank
questions.
You.
Appreciate it. Joy, are you able to slow down enough to unmute? Yeah, that's a lot. High speed operation. Joy, thank you for joining. Tell folks where you are. What's on your mind?
Hi, long time listener, first time caller, so I'm kind of nervous, but
no, don't be nervous. We're delighted to have you. Take your time.
I'm from Illinois, Republican since 18, so voted for Republicans until 2016. I wrote someone in. Very reluctantly voted for Trump the last 2 times, maybe slightly less so this time. But anyway, yes, I have 1 comment, 1 question. My first comment is I don't think the Democrats should underestimate the power of RFK, because obviously I'm a staunch Republican and I almost voted for RFK in Illinois because he was still on the ballot, because I'm a mom. So all of this stuff he's talking about, taking dyes out of food, all the things that really spoke to me, and I'm very pro-life, so that's kind of a weird one too. But I just really resonate with the things he's trying to do for health. And I think that's one thing they underestimated about the woman vote, is that there's a lot of moms very concerned about this, like really, really concerned. So Yes, I don't think
Joy,
they
let me ask you a question about that one, if I could. What
yeah.
makes you think that Donald Trump will adopt the RFK agenda on those issues?
Well, honestly, it remains to be seen. I actually don't know. I think it's one of those calculated risks that we all had to kind of like take, I guess. I do think Trump probably wants to keep the pro-life side of the party happy. So I'm hoping that like he just keeps his word on that side of things. Honestly, I think Trump kind of wants to be like done with abortion a little bit and just kind of wants to be like, hey, it's in the States. Let's move on. So
all right, Joy, thanks for that.
Yeah.
What's your question?
My question is, I like want to know the hot goss about Biden. For some reason, I have this theory that he's trying to give the middle finger to the Democratic Party because of kind of how they stabbed him in the back. And his behavior over the last couple of months has been like, what are you doing? And from the point that like Trump visited him in the White House and he was grinning like crazy in front of that roaring fire, I was like, what the heck? He looks like exuberant that Trump is there. There's a conspiracy theory floating around that he voted for Trump. I don't know about that. But anyway, I'm just curious, like, do you think that he is with some of these like weird things that he's doing, the pardon after he said he wouldn't, and like to Dan's point earlier, he's just like, it's like I don't know if he doesn't care anymore, if he's trying to give the middle finger, or if this is his version of like, I'm burning it down on my way out. I just would be curious to hear your thoughts on his mindset.
Awesome question, Joy. Thank you. Dan.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if he voted for Trump. I think he had a lot riding on if she won, because it would continue his legacy of the programs that he passed and the things that he's done. She would build on them. I think he's so prideful and he is aware of history that I can't imagine being this missing in action is a calculated plan of like, screw the party, because I think this is going to be part of his legacy now, that once he stopped running in July, he largely disappeared from the scene. Some of that was obviously because he was no longer the nominee and he needed to give Harris the spotlight. But he has been so missing in action. We've said this before, he still hasn't addressed the Ukraine escalation. With Syria, I think he spoke very briefly, but there have been things happening on his watch where traditionally a president would step forward and, even a post-election press conference. And he's not doing any of this at all. He's letting Trump completely own the spotlight. The only thing I can think of is it's the same reason he didn't do a lot of the things when, early in his presidency. He can't do it, or he can, but they don't know, will today be a bad day? And if we put him out there, and like he was in the debate, where everybody saw it, you can't really spin it, or they tried, but no one believes it, that they don't want to end his presidency with one last humiliation. So they just made the decision to keep him away. And to me, I've been sad about it. I've been angry about it. Just really disappointed as a Democrat.
Sean.
Yeah, two quick comments on it, Joy. First of all, I thought yesterday it was interesting, the comments that Trump made about Bobby and vaccines, and also the meetings that he had with the pharma companies. I thought was fascinating. If I were, this is way out of my wheelhouse, so I'm just going to say, but if I were one of these pharmacy benefit managers, I'd be very, very worried these days. Whoever represents them in Washington better ask for a raise, because if I had to guess where the target is going to end up right now, that's there. The PBMs, as they call them, I have a feeling that's where everybody's going to coalesce around getting them. You heard the meeting was fascinating because the pharma companies didn't come out and sort of say defend. I mean, there was no public readout of the meeting on either end, and I thought that was fascinating. I think that on the pro-life issues, I think he will maintain his commitments. Trump understands the power of this. He may not go as far as you want, but if you think about all of his talking points over the years, he's been very proud about what he's done to the pro-life community. He's addressed the March for Life. I mean, all these things. I don't see him backtracking on that at all. and then on the Biden stuff, like I agree largely with Dan on this. I think that Biden is a guy who has always been concerned about his legacy and what he's doing. And that's why I think when we talked about the pardons and everything else, if I were him, I'd spend the last 36 days doing things to ingratiate yourself with these coalitions on the left that are critical to the Democratic Party. I don't want him to do them, just so we're clear for the record, so no one says that. But that's what he needs to do. He is a guy that loves institutions. He loves the process, right? So he wants to go out with a sense of I did this, but I did it the right way. And again, I think the Hunter Biden probably will be part of his legacy that he's not happy about, but it is what it is. But I think that there's an element of what he can and cannot physically and mentally do that's overriding this.
Joy, thank you for adding your voice to those people who happen to be parents. Speaking about Bobby Kennedy, one of the great insights I gleaned from this platform in the months leading up to the election was a lot of Americans, tens of millions, I think, agree with you, and a big part of Bobby Kennedy's appeal, but also Trump's appeal in taking him on and embracing the agenda, something the issues he's never really talked about, in any significant way. And I do think there's a good chance that he will revolutionize America. Both of them will if they pursue this agenda, and they'll have great support from parents.
Yes.
On your second point, question, I don't have a perfect clarity into this. I can tell you, Joe Biden, as Sean and Dan both said, he cares about his legacy. He really does feel like it was the wrong thing to force him out, and that he would have done better. He had no confidence that Kamala Harris could beat Donald Trump ever in any part of the process, and was forced into endorsing her, even though he didn't want to, and most of her people didn't want him to. And I think he feels kind of frustration that he's not given enough credit for what he accomplished as president. It wasn't that long ago that Democrats in the media were saying he was the most accomplished president since Roosevelt. And to go from that to a guy forced off the ticket, I think is a pretty humbling thing. And this is a guy who cares about legacy, as Sean said, but he's so prideful. He's so prideful. And I think what he's going through now is, rather than being president for 4 more years, he's facing a very different short-term future, which is so different than the life he's lived since his 20s, where he's, except for the brief period between being vice president and president, he's been in public office for decades. And I think you combine his decline in mental acuity with the realization of moving out of the White House, moving back home, not having thousands of people working for him, not having any official title, and probably too old to do the stuff he did after the vice presidency. Right? He's not going to be setting up foundations and centers, and that's a lot to process. So someone with a mental decline processing all that, I think some of the things you cited very astutely are just manifestations of how difficult this moment is for him. And remember that a lot of people in the party do blame him. In fact, to my surprise, they blame him so far, in my experience, substantially more than they blame Kamala Harris. And so he hears that. He's shielded from some of it, but he hears that. And his view is, why are you blaming me? I was a very successful president. I thought I should still be the nominee. I told people it shouldn't be Kamala Harris because she couldn't win. And then you disregarded me, kicked me off the ticket, picked her. And now Trump's going to be president again. So that's a lot to deal with for, again, a very prideful guy.
Yeah.
Can I make one more comment?
Yeah, go ahead, Sean, and then
Joy,
back to
one
you,
of the
Joy.
things that I think is that I really appreciate how Trump is approaching, especially the Maha movement, is there's a prevailing philosophy in Washington about this has always happened this way. This is how it's always been, right? And so, like, I love the way he answered the vaccine question yesterday. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a medical professional, but I do know that we've seen rates of autism, cancer rates among young people, and our life expectancy go down. And I think it's fair to ask the question, why? What are we doing differently? What can we be doing to solve these problems? I don't know the answers, but I think it's good that we're asking those questions. And that's what we've been taught, getting second opinions, finding out are there adverse causes to certain things based on maybe a genetic marker or something. I don't know, but I think that the idea that you can't ask a question is wrong. We should be challenging things. Science and technology evolve over time, and we should be taking advantage of that if there's better ways to solve problems. So I love the idea of challenging the status quo and finding out if we can be doing things better. But the idea that some of these things are settled is ridiculous. That's not what science is about. It's using the advances that we make to further the science. And so I just think that the idea of sitting back and saying, God, we're doing this, but autism rates are going through the roof. We're doing this, cancer rates among young people are going higher and higher, and life expectancy is going down. But let's not do anything about it would be insane.
Joy, how many kids do you have?
I have two. And I
How
just
old are they?
4 and 1. And I just want to say that I think moms have felt very they've felt like they're crazy for wanting to ask those questions when clearly there's a problem. Like, it's just so clear that there's a problem. And so I think that it was part of the backlash vote was moms being like, you're making us feel like we're crazy. And I don't think we are. At the very least, we just want some research and answers about it. I'm not saying I'm never gonna, poke a needle in my kid. I'm just saying I want answers, and there's obviously, I think vaccines are just one part of it. I don't think it's all of it. And there's clearly a problem with food. And so I just think we don't want to feel crazy for wanting to keep our kids safe. And so, yeah.
Amen, Joy.
Well said.
And look, vaccines are a miracle, and there's no
Yes.
doubt that the COVID vaccine development saved a lot of people's lives. At the same time, we all know tons of parents who think it changed their kids.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and people, we shouldn't be afraid to say that and have the conversation and try to figure it out rather than just saying all vaccines are great. What are you talking about?
yeah, and demonizing parents. I mean, just like
Yeah.
stop demonizing moms. So I
Yeah.
just want to say I love you guys. Thank you for what you're doing, Dan. You're my favorite Democrat. So keep going.
Joy, thank you. Thanks for coming. Please come back regularly. Tell all your friends. We're not as big in Illinois, according to the data, as we'd like to be. So thank you.
Okay. Awesome.
Thank you. All right. Pastor Wayne, come on in. Tell folks where you are and what's on your mind, please, after you unmute.
Yeah, I am offhand here. I'm in southern Indiana. I'm in Cynthiana, just north of Evansville. I'm a pastor here in a small town of about 500 people. And it's the privilege of a lifetime to do that. I grew up in Alabama, and I've been up here for 35 years. So
You've almost lost the accent, but not quite yet.
Yeah. I never had, and if you know my sister down there, she's got enough of it for both of us. So
how do you pronounce CREEK?
What?
CREEK.
Oh, creek. But I
Okay.
know people that say creek. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. That's my acid test for Alabama.
If it was down there, it'd be creek. But okay.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Roll Tide. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, yeah, a couple of things, some observations I just wanted to kind of throw at you all. And by the way, I love the format. I wish that we had more and more people doing this. I've heard a lot of people saying this, but I just echo this. I appreciate finding you. The credibility of the press, I know we've talked about that. I think that it dropped off a cliff after this, during this election. I think that COVID had a huge amount to do because COVID just became, the press really just became the mouthpiece of the government. And I see people flocking to other sources like this one because they want answers and they can't trust the press anymore, the mainstream press. And it's not only, I think about the first, the Harris Trump debate, the only one they had, and it was just almost laughable, the questions that they chose and the way that they went after. It was like it just made no sense, and I think people saw that. So I just throw that out there.
Great point. The only thing I'd annotate on what you said is you said it was almost laughable.
Yeah. And it's just been one thing after another, and I see people going away from that, and I'm really glad that they are because I think people's eyes are open to what we have. That we have basically had a state press, and now I don't know. I see them being more closely, more balanced, a little bit toward Trump right now, but I don't see that lasting very long. Yeah, one thing I also wanted to just throw out at you that I haven't heard people talk about much is this coalition that Trump has put together is far different than the one in 16. And I hear this about it's kind of the narrative that both parties have gone to the extreme, that the left, that the Democrats have gone to the far left, which I agree with. I mean, it's almost become a socialist party. Sorry, Dan, I love you, but that's the way I see it. And on the other hand, that the Republicans have gone to the far right. But we've got a party here that is taking an RFK Jr., who I like him a lot. I can't, his position on abortion, I can't stand. I'm very strongly pro-life. We've got Tulsi Gabbard in the same party with, the far MAGA people. So I don't really buy that narrative that the Republicans have gone off to the extreme right. It seems to me that this is a very moderate, more moderate, and I'm saying this more from the right side, that I think that he's holding together a coalition that probably only he could do. So just wanted your thoughts about that.
Okay, Pastor Winker, two great topics. Sean, take one or both.
Yeah, I would just say you're absolutely right. I mean, you think about the guy that's nominated to be the HHS secretary. I can't recall a non-pro-life HHS secretary going back through. I mean, you got with Sullivan and Bush 41. I mean, like, so I who is pro-life? I mean, I can't go back beyond Reagan. So I agree with you. I think that we've become much more accepting of different views in the party. The idea that we've got these Democrats, former Democrats, at the highest levels now speaks volumes about the kind of people that Trump's bringing in. The coalition is stronger. There's no doubt about that. I will just say, and I commented to Dan and Mark about this before we brought everyone in, but like to your point about the media, Trump won this lawsuit against ABC News, or they settled with him, to be accurate, because they lied. That's it. Full stop. George Stephanopoulos lied about the charges that Donald Trump was facing. And they settled with him for whatever reasons. And you have a bunch of bedwetters out there from the media, the Washington Post, Politico, Chuck Todd, Jim Acosta at CNN, talking about how the media is under attack and that they'll never be able to do their job the same way. I'm sorry. Your job is to tell the truth and facts. And if you don't think that you can do that anymore, because look, lawsuits cost money. And when you meet with a lawyer to sue a media outlet, they're going to say, okay, here's the New York Times Standard and Sullivan that you have to meet. Here's how much it's going to cost you. We're going to go through discovery. This is not an easy process. So there's a huge deterrent to going through that. And the bottom line is that the media doesn't do their job. They should face accountability for lying and smearing people's reputations. And they found it. So if you're in the media, you should be applauding the ABC decision, saying, good, we got held accountable when we didn't do the right thing, when we weren't honest. And I think all of these folks on the left who are whining about the freedom of the press, they just want the ability to say whatever they want about anyone whenever they want. And that's wrong.
Dan.
Yeah, I agree with Sean on the press. I mean, look, if the standard gets moved, so to speak, where the court system cracks down on people saying slanderous stuff about politicians, boy, the Clintons and the Obamas would have been very happy if that was the standard when they were in office. And there will be Democratic leaders in hopefully the near future. And the same set of, once you set these precedents, it will be, it will be our turn to hold people accountable for saying, incorrect and lies about Democrats. The second thing I would just say about coalitions, Trump has expanded the Republican coalition. He has added people in all three of his runs. He has added, obviously, working class people of color. The Democrats have added people, like we've added kind of what I guess I'll call the country club Republicans, the Liz Cheneys of the world. We lost, wasn't by a huge margin, but we lost. We need to get more voters into our coalition. But right now, I think both parties are going through a change. And I think Trump right now is more of a blue collar, represents the blue collar. We represent more of the white collar services, kind of urban centers. And you're battling for that suburban vote. And we need to improve our standing with the working class. So.
All right, we got to end on time. Thanks to everybody who asked questions. Everybody had your hand up. Sorry we didn't get to you. Tonight, 6 p.m. Eastern time, here on this channel. Wayne, thank you for the question. here on this channel. I like to call it a channel. I think we have a graphic. Maybe we don't. 6 p.m. Eastern time. It's two-way tonight. Batya Ungar Sargon of Newsweek will be amongst our guests. We hope you will join us for that. And then starting Friday night, we're off. We're off for 2 weeks. So there'll be shows all the way through this program Monday morning, but then after that, we're off for 2 weeks. So you may send me daily emails saying I didn't get a link to be on the show. If there's breaking news, we'll have back. But please don't have me spend my vacation answering emails about why there's no show. There are no shows starting Friday night for 2 weeks. We'll be back in January. Thank you for watching. The three of us will be back at 9 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow, and I'll be back tonight at 6 p.m. for Two Way Tonight. Thank you. Have a good day, gentlemen. Bon voyage.
Bon voyage.